Hello and welcome to part 2 of our generational deep dive through Monster Hunter, going through Mazeron's Why Monster Hunter Sucks Now video with MH United, prolific Monster Hunter 2nd gen player, guide maker, researcher extraordinaire. If you guys haven't seen the first part, please go check that out. It's going to be a 4-part series, but feel free to come back and watch this whenever you're done. But if you don't feel like doing all that, feel free to stick around. It's not mandatory that you go watch it in order. You just might miss a little bit of the context to some of the stuff that we talk about in this video and the ones after. Thank you. Let's keep unpacking this video. I'm sure we'll have lots of bridges to cross.
Slowly getting through it. Yeah.
It's definitely a good catalyst for discussion as a whole.
But that took that took a lot of practice and understanding, whereas any schmuck can get the same level of safety in 3U. Let's talk about player damage now. This is about the damage you take instead of what you save.
Now actually, real quick.
That could easily be manipulated by expert players in previous games. But that took a lot of practice and understanding, whereas any schmuck can get the same level of safety in 3U.
So, I guess not to dwell too long on it, but the rhetoric of new power is introduced and you can stack more of it. So it changes the ability for, like, what was once exclusive to an elite sector of the player base that took the time to learn and understand these games, now can be matched easily by any Johnny-come-lately or average Joe. A lot of that rhetoric exists, from the wire bugs in Rise, was the first perpetrator before. Like, people are glazing Rise right now. Wire bugs was focus mode before focus mode was focus mode. Like, people were hating on wire bugs. They were saying that it was trivializing the game. Anybody could beat the monsters. Anybody can destroy them. Anyone can stagger lock.
I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know that I can necessarily say that I could draw a post or a specific instance to point to, but I'm sure people probably had a similar sentiment going from 4's guild style to Generations Ultimate with its arts.
Adept in Valor and Absolute Readiness, like all of that stuff. I've heard Jin and GU specifically as well with Valor be described as like just baby's first old Jin because you have access to all that craziness. I mean, even like 4 and the mount spam, like people were like, you can just mount spam everything to death and beat the game easy.
No, I mean it's the mounting push hold in early 4th generation was insane. And it does change the nature. So the credit I'll give to mount spam is it's kind of like trap spam or flash spam in 2nd generation. It does fundamentally change the nature of like what the monster is capable of doing when it's being locked down like that. It's not a hard lock like headlocking, but it is a type of lock.
More CC,
yeah.
I mean,
and that's the other discussion. I don't think he touches it on it in here. The amount of time a monster stays down after getting staggered has changed throughout the series. I wouldn't be able to tell you, I wouldn't be able to give you averages on like the amount of time a toppled monster stays toppled for. But it is, to some degree it has increased, and to some degree it's, with some monsters it's decreased. Like some monsters have counters now, like Rajang. When he gets toppled, if he's near a wall, he just comes flying right back at you.
True, the Iceborne Rajang.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even things like this though are kind of subject to how much health monsters have, like their flinch thresholds. Like there's all sorts of like little things that can change, or even access to new tools doesn't equal mastery of the tools. So like,
I think things have also just gotten more complex too. If you took the weapons and the creatures from Monster Hunter 1, there's just a lot less going on. So individually, the things that do exist have more of a presence because you'll see them more often. But you're also dealing with a lot less overhead. I like the combo for, let's say, learning something like Lance in new gen, like in the latest game versus Monster Hunter 1. Monster Hunter 1, you flick on the right stick. I mean, that's how you input attacks. But like, yeah, you just, I believe it's down. You flick down 3 times. Compare that to like canceling into Power Guard into whatever the other gimmicks are, like into Clutch Claw, into a Wire Bug counter, into whatever the other type of power guard is, and then being able to know what follow-ups are optimal for each option. Like, there's a whole lot more to learn on that end too.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. Funny enough, with AT Uthduna that just came out. Funny enough, I had forgotten that you can fast Wyvern's Fire after you perfect block with Gunlance, and so
yep, the fact that you can shorten Wyvern's Fire at all with Gunlance is something that didn't exist before. You know.
Yeah, which is nuts. But the thing
I
was,
guess,
like,
aside from Alchemy Style, but anyway, yeah.
aside from this one instance. But yeah, I had forgotten you can do that, and the best thing you can do against AT Uthduna with Gunlance, because of how oppressive it is to perfect block into fast Wyvern's Fire. And I wasn't able to do that the entire hunt when I first fought it, and so it took me a significantly longer amount of time not knowing or not remembering that I could do that than it did whenever I did know that you can do that. It was just that one simple change in playstyle, that one simple extra thing that I was able to implement that just changes it, like, in a huge way, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be the same for people who don't know about, like, having the Helm Splitter cancel for Longsword. Like, the amount of uptime that you're gonna have is gonna be very different.
Yeah.
And those things, I think it's cool that you see a lot of these different types of videos and different types of players and the different there's what is it called? What's cool about Monster Hunter is you can very easily tell when a player is skilled because of those sorts of knowledge gaps. But it's also cool to see a beginner who doesn't know things and is playing blind, like, find ways to overcome things with like limited tools or limited or just basically making the game harder for themselves, you know?
Yeah. I've heard of people going through, like, their first Monster Hunter and they don't understand that they have to use red buff to enhance their IG moveset. And so they play through without it. And that's, like, wild to me. That is insane to me, you know?
Yeah, and there are people who've beaten I bet you there are people who've beaten the game in very unconventional ways just because they
just
were
taking a hammer to the legs.
You know? Well, yeah. What is it called? I remember there's a few streamers who didn't understand, like, the core weapon mechanics, and I don't necessarily blame them for it. That's where it depends on how you engage with the game, because if you decide to engage with it blindly and then look in retrospect, see what you missed, it's going to lead to a totally different experience than people who share information and look things up and how quickly they're going to pick things up. And those people are going to argue different things are easier or harder, and it's not to say that, that they're both right and they're both wrong in different ways. It creates a bit of a mess.
It's just another one of those, like, idiosyncratic points where everyone has their own journey through Monster Hunter and, like, their different feelings towards it. It's like a constant evolution of the series and you as a player as well.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean, that happens with most video games, but there's just so much variance in Monster Hunter because things aren't as tutorials aren't as pushed and things aren't as scripted. So a lot of people will argue that's not, or what is it called? That's Monster Hunter doing a disservice to its players. At the same time, like, and I can see where they're coming from. Like, hey, if you're trying to get more people to understand the game, there are going to be some people who bounce off this barrier to entry. At the same time, it also creates a unique experience for the people who do get past that initial hurdle or the whatever hurdles they are going through on their journey. In a way that they wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to, like, go through that personal development, as Mazeron would put it.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. It's a good talking point.
Let's talk about player damage now. This is about the damage you take instead of what you deal. I've tested this in a variety of circumstances, and when comparing some individual hits, the discrepancy isn't too bad. With a G-rank armor set on with the same defense and freedom and 3U, a Rage Mode Diablos charge does about the same damage. It's around 4% less than 3U. The majority of hits, though, do less damage. Naruga's Tail Smash in Freedom Unite was a deadly attack you had to be prepared for, but here, not even a G-rank Rage Mode Lucent Naruga can get more than about 2/3 of your HP off, depending on your defense of course. The event Devil Joe only does around 75% damage to a player without any armor on with the big swing bite attack. Even some of the heaviest attacks in the whole game, like Morales' Belly Flop, can't kill a gunner. There's no such thing as the average hit to calculate and compare between generations to give you an exact figure, but it should be uncontroversial to say that the majority of monster hits do significantly less damage to players. Aside from regular attacks, there's what I call trample damage. This is the small amounts of damage you take from getting kicked or bumped when a creature moves around very close to you, like when a Tigrex tends to face you and his paw clips a little bit off your HP. There was a lot of this in previous games, and in some cases you really needed to be careful or the little bits of damage would add up very quickly, as anyone who's ever stood behind a taunting 2nd generation Silver Rathlos will tell you. In 3rd and 4th generations, trample damage is all but removed for most creatures. It makes sense that a huge creature with big sharp claws bumping into you does a little bit of damage, and from a gameplay perspective it comes back to player skill, that being correct positioning. You had to manage the distance that you were from the creature, close enough to damage it reliably, but far enough to be able to evade attacks and the passive trample damage. This is another skill that's been removed or reduced from the game, making the game easier. One of the corollaries of removing the majority of trample damage is that it makes the main hits much less severe. If you're taking 50% of your health off when you're at full health or near full health, that's one thing. But if you're taking often little amounts of damage from being badly positioned, suddenly that 50% damage attack is much more severe. Which is why even the big attacks in 3rd generation aren't as serious, even if they are some of the ones that weren't already nerfed in damage.
Now, couple things. A couple things. First off, in regard to the overall damage between 2nd and 3rd gen, from my understanding, 2nd gen does have a unique characteristic of having more damage overall, right?
He was talking about, so he did mention, I think it was 1st gen and 3rd gen are very similar.
Okay.
It's uniquely 2nd gen from what I understand that has a different formula. Now, I don't know if it applies to, I have to do more testing on dose, but in Freedom Soon, Freedom Unite, and that's what the other video that you had up on the last video was like talking about. Yes, there's a different formula, and the way, what is it called? It's hard to describe the defense formula. Basically, what you need to know in all Monster Hunter games, the earlier points of defense matter more for the reduction of damage than the later points of defense, with the way the formula works. And it's one of the factors, I think. So he talks about having the same defense between, I think it was like 3 Ultimate and Freedom. Having the same defense between those two, Gen 1 and Gen 3, results in like very similar amounts of damage. One of the things that people will bring up against 3U is the fact that you do have that free, for the international releases of I'm pretty certain it's the international releases. I don't know about Europe. But you do get a free 50 defense when wearing no armor. And that matters a lot because the first 50 defense points contribute to a significant amount of damage reduction relative to the damage you're taking. That doesn't mean that you can't, like when he's talking about like, oh, when you're naked against the events Devil Joe, the thing that I always wonder is like, okay, well, is that a 3U thing or a 3G thing? And how would that have impacted the Western players versus the Japanese players? Was the intent of giving the 50 free points, like, were they receiving feedback from Western players that the games were too hard? I'm not entirely certain. Did they think it would be more accessible if they added it? Because they didn't think it was necessary and try. Yeah, I don't know the rationale behind it. And it's clearly something that's not stuck around. It is an interesting talking point. It's also where I would bring up, like, as we were talking about complexity before, like the increasing complexity in movesets and for both players and the monsters. Yeah, chip damage, trample damage as he calls it, in Gen 1 and Gen 2 mattered a lot. It did matter a lot.
Now, for quick, being able to relate purposes, Do you ever
Sure.
fight the EX deviants in GU?
Yes.
So you know how they chip really, really hard?
Yeah, no, I was about to say that the GU deviants to me reminds me a lot of first and second generation monsters relative to the player's power level.
Okay. Now, are we talking like EX or are we talking like just like G5?
No,
and-
like the base deviants.
Okay.
The EX ones I think would probably be like harder event equivalents, and obviously it's going to vary depending on your, like, if it's your first time doing the it's deviants are weird.
Because they chip hard, like the EX version specifically. Grimclaw will turn to the left, and if you scrape his leg, boom, there goes like 20% of your health.
It'll cleave. Yeah, it's, and again, he's talking about this relative to, again, 3 being the most recent game. I'm not sure what his stance would be on
4th gen.
4th gen in general, and what the rationale would be.
Yeah, but just trying to like, you know, think about it from like a relating standpoint, because the chip is there in GU, but it's not so big of a role that you have to plan around it. You can take a bunch of chip damage before you have to start worrying about it.
Yeah, so the thing that's cool about chip damage in all of the games before World is that it consumes your finite resources for the quest. And it does, again, as he mentioned, it does bring you in range of attacks that weren't originally like a 1 or 2 shot.
So it's plugging away at that lack of restock, basically.
Yeah, different fights, like, obviously you're not going to encounter, so not every fight is going to bring you... Yankaku, for the most part, if I was to fight him, isn't necessarily going to bring me in range of running out of resources, you know, from just the trample damage and the regular hits. But there are fights later in first and second generation where, like, yeah, a player who is mismanaging their position will find themselves in substantial danger, and like it's almost worse than fainting, which is weird to say. when you're because fainting is a resource too. Like you have 3 carts. Obviously, in 4th gen, you've got an optional cart that you can get from eating. I'm pretty certain it's... I don't remember which game introduced feline insurance, but at some point that number changes. But they are a resource, and if you burn through all of your consumable healing, there are instances in first and second generation, if you're trying to solo the content or trying to even duo it, where, like, let's say you're out of stamina and you don't have stamina recovery items. Sometimes I'll eat a feint just to regen that stamina, get back to base camp, and grab the base camp supplies with less of a time penalty if I don't have a Farcaster, if I don't want to use a Farcaster. And that's because inventory space, and Ludi could go on and on and on about inventory space, but your inventory space, like, different people would describe that as a quality of life change, but no, it has serious combat related and gameplay related ramifications when you have limited resources, because it dictates just how versatile your inventory can be. And it's the same thing with combo books. Like, if you look at combo books towards the end of their implementation, I could see why people were questioning, is it really necessary for combo books to exist? But when you're dealing with a limited amount of inventory, further limiting it for consistency, which is what the combo books offered, that and the combo books were they didn't do an amazing job at it, at balancing out ammo combines for gunners. There are different considerations. The thing that I'll bring up sort of kind of as an in-between, there are different considerations and different skills you'll have to have when playing different games in the Monster Hunter, or different generations of games in the Monster Hunter series. Because the type of resource management that you'll do in Gen 1 and Gen 2 is not the type of resource management that you'll do in Gen 4, Gen 5, or Wilds. And even between Gen 4 and Gen 5, there's a big difference. I love finding personally, so I've done multiple streams, and I hope I eventually get back to streaming it because I just finished an armor set for it. I've been working on a challenge of overcoming Monster Hunter 2's Yamasukami solo to make a guide on how to tackle Yamasukami, because if you didn't know, Yama's different in DOS than it is in Freedom Unite, and those are the only 2 games it's ever appeared in. And what's cool about that fight is there are certain items that are really useful in that fight that you would never expect. Or I would say just you wouldn't conventionally think to use them. Some speedrunners occasionally use smoke bombs, but smoke bombs are amazing in Yama's fight. To the point at which I carried, like, there was a time I was carrying like 20 of them for some matchups. And I don't think I could say that unless I was looking at a very bizarre optimized speed run. Like, I don't know that I could say that about soloing any hunt in Wilds. And it's not to disparage specifically Wilds. Same would apply to like 5th gen or 4th gen. Well, maybe not 4th gen. There's a use case for smoke bombs in 4th gen. That's in multi-monster hunts. But yeah, it's something that like greatly increases the odds of me winning playing solo. And that's cool. It's a different type of skill set. And again, I can sympathize with Maze being like, hey, I really like, I don't think he articulated it particularly well, because he's like, oh yeah, all of these 3rd gen players are unskilled. But I would argue that it's more, hey, these elements of the game that I really liked that required a certain amount of skill to execute, or like a certain knowledge to make use of, they aren't emphasized anymore. And that's fair. There are those shifts in between games. There are different considerations that you'll have to make, and there are different types of difficulty that you'll encounter. You know, it's hard. It'd be hard to describe all of them in general if you haven't played through them yourselves. So, and it's going to be different for players who are playing in multiplayer than players who are attempting to do different types of challenges or to play solo.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's keep going then.
There's also different types of hits that were removed, particularly insta-charges. That is, when a creature, usually a wyvern like Rathalos or Cuckoo, will go from a stationary animation immediately into a full body tackle. These are impossible to predict and highly damaging, and punish players for hanging out in front of a creature too long, exploiting the head hitbox. They also had pretty bad hitboxes, where being behind the back legs could still lead to you taking full damage. The majority of these untelegraphed attacks are out now, which is a good thing, but again, it reinforces the reduced importance of the positioning for the player. There's also virtually no instant kill attacks anymore. It was mainly the Fatalis trio in previous games who did this, and I'm not suggesting it's great game design, but it's another example of how the game is much more forgiving. Mistakes against the final boss no longer require you to work out where you went wrong to succeed when you can heal up and keep at it. So not only is the damage you do way up.
So let's address some things there. Number one, instant kill attacks aren't, I mean, it's not exactly true. There are a lot of things that will one-shot you for a lot of gear. That being said, most of the things that one-shot you are assigned an element. If you didn't know, physical attacks from Elder Dragons in the 2nd generation and in some other games, specifically in the 2nd generation from Elder Dragons, with the exception of, I think, Kieran, did dragon damage. Rathalos was also able to use dragon damage. So like Fatalis' physical attacks used to be so high that they'll one-shot a lot of players with neutral, somewhat resistant dragon resistance. But if you spec enough into it, like if you were to build a really resistant dragon set and high enough defense, you could survive, and it's technically a valid strategy in multiplayer. It'd be very hard for you to build a defensive set that protected you against the one-shots, or like the moves that have the potential to one-shot, and to tailor it to do enough damage with all of the weapon types. Some of the weapon types can afford it, but not all of them, depending on the weapons balance. The other thing, so there aren't really true one-shots. Not in the way that, like, what do you call it? Safi Jiva's nuke is a one shot. You know, it's not that type of one shot when we're talking about these things. It's just usually it's just a very, very powerful attack. And the gut skill existed in Freedom. I think it's Freedom Unite that introduces the gut skill.
Was guts
Either
like a
Freedom
common
Skill-
thing people were running?
No, but it was an option. Like, it's an option to be aware of. And it does exist on a pretty powerful set end game, but the sets, people didn't necessarily, the sets end game in like Freedom Unite took a lot of resources and a lot of time investment, and it wasn't particularly common if you were just playing like the PlayStation Portable on Ad Hoc Party, or I'm sure it's more common now, actually, now that we can use either if you emulate or if you use your computer to extend the local network. It's probably more common now to run into players who have the endgame sets that would have had guts attached to them. It wasn't particularly common for a good chunk of players back in the day, though. That and guts is still like, yeah, sure, you might survive the one shot, but if you're out of position and it's like the monster turns and hits you with the tail, like any bit of damage will just one shot
Yeah.
you, like afterwards. So it wasn't necessarily free in a sense. The point is, it like, again, don't take all of that as like 100% fact. There are some cases where it's not, but it's also not entirely off track. With regards to the instant charges, again, I mentioned it earlier, they are impossible to react, like technically impossible to react to, like depending on your position. But there are tells for it. It's just not the move that's going to give you that tell. There's just the way it turns. There's different types of, and you'll encounter it in 4U too. There are different types of moves you'll have to predict or account for. And then there are moves that you can react to. And things like instant charges are a positional and predictive type of move rather than hey, you can just react to this and get out of it if you react fast enough or respond with the right thing. At the same time, like if you're running, auto guard exists in 1st through 3rd gen, maybe even 4th gen.
Yeah, there's an auto guard talisman you get early in the village.
So there's counterplay there. Like it's not uncounterable, even if you're not used to predicting things. Like you have options, they're just not necessarily, they wouldn't be what you would be using when you were looking to do speedruns necessarily. But they're on the table. It's not like this doom and gloom thing. And then the last thing I'll touch on, he did talk about hitboxes. Yeah, there are going to be hitboxes that extend beyond the model. And he'll talk a little bit more about them. But one thing to consider is that the PSP had worse hitboxes across the board than the PS2 did.
Okay.
And that's partially because of the limitations of the console. And because when I was talking to Incognito about hitboxes, he'd claimed that from looking at the code, it looked like the developers honestly did do the best with what they were given with regards to the hitboxes. Just partially a limitation of the game, but also there are some hitboxes that are designed to give the player a particular experience, and so while some people might find it unfair, there is some intention behind it.
Yeah.
It's not just a result of a bug. Anyway, we can continue.
Well, a couple things quickly on the hitbox thing. Funny enough, it's no Freedom Unite Plesioth, but I fought Monoblos. Monoblos has like a little hip check, and one thing that I noticed was that even if I positioned myself like behind Monoblos when it was doing the hip check, if I was in a range to hit it, I would still get hit by it, even if I was behind it in a funny way.
It's you'll encounter cases like that, and for me, when I look at hitboxes, I see that more as a communication issue than as a hitbox issue. Like if given the option between shrinking the hitbox or changing up the animation or the visual effects to make it to warn the player a little bit more clearly, I would rather change up the visual effects than the hitbox itself.
Yeah. Well, I adapted to it and, learned where I could position myself and get away with it.
Yeah, because they're, regardless of the game, the hit, as long as you're within the same quest with fighting the same size of monster, those hitboxes for every attack are going to be consistent. They're not impossible to learn, and yeah, it's annoying to get hit by things you didn't think you should get hit by. But if you're playing, honestly, any Monster Hunter title, I would try not to get caught up too much in like being frustrated with them, and more be like, at least the approach that I typically have is like, okay, well, I'd like to take them apart and be like, okay, what can I do to get around them? What's my best option for these? Take it more as a challenge and science experiment.
Yeah. It's like, damn,
that's kind of how my brain works.
Yeah, it's like, damn, I can't stand right there, but that just means I need to find somewhere else, like kind of deal.
And the player has some really janky hitboxes you can manipulate too. The other thing I'll bring up is that sometimes it's in some hitbox interactions when you're new, and I can sympathize with new players being frustrated. Some hitbox interactions are due to your inputs and character model. Like if I guard poke with a gun lance in first and second gen, my hand extends and that changes my hurt box relative to the hitbox.
Okay.
Same thing, it's kind of like jumping up in the air with an insect glaive and having to deal with the aerial hitboxes all of a sudden, which you don't normally have to deal with on the ground. And like, again, I've been there as a player who's just starting the games and have been frustrated with, and still occasionally get frustrated with hitboxes, but like, I don't think they're game breakers for me. Some people might disagree, but it's another thing that you'll have to consider depending on the games that you're playing, and the weapons that you're using. And whether or not you consider that fair, unfair, artificial, or like quote unquote regular difficulty, that's up to you. But it is something when we're having these difficulty conversations to like keep in mind that is learning those things is a skill. And dealing with those things is a factor. How much emphasis you put on it, it just varies.
Yeah. Now, one last thing for this section. He makes the claim that there are less insta-charge attacks, so like they're doing away with them, like unpredictable insta-charges. Is that actually true? Because there's still a lot of insta-charges in like even 4 and G.
I mean, yeah. At the time, it looked like they were trending that direction. I'd say no. There are, so like, moves that come out very quick. There are fewer moves that do as much damage as like an instant charge does. But there are a lot of quick moves that are very hard to react to that you kind of have to predict. He'll actually bring up one of them. In this video, but there's a few like different animations and stuff that even exist in like modern titles. I mean, look at Cuckoo, and granted that's an old monster in a modern title, but like, yeah, usually when moves are faster like that, they tend to tone down the damage and also tone down either the follow-up or the reaction to it. Again, it depends on how you like where you it's up to the player to determine what you would consider a proper tell for a move, and when a move doesn't have a proper tell, people are going to draw the lines differently than I would.
Gotcha. Now it is interesting that he puts in the caveat that's like those kinds of moves were meant to punish you for abusing the head hit zone. And I'd never thought about it that way, really. Like, I knew that you'd get punished for standing there just hitting the head, but I never thought about it as an intentional, you're standing there just smashing the softest hit zone. So now, you know, we're
Yeah,
gonna
be the
punish you
most-
for that.
On some level, it should be the most dangerous place to attack or to like position to attack should be the weakest point on the creature. It should either be hard to attack it, or it should be, again, like the most threatening spot on the monster, at least in monsters that are intended to be hard or somewhat challenging, I should say. I think it's just good game design on that end. I don't know that like the instant charge is necessarily like the only solution they could have come up with that, but yeah, no, it is an interesting explanation for it, for sure.
Definitely. All right, moving on.
The damage you take is way down. This leads to battles of attrition. That is, the penalties for taking hits are so low, you don't need to worry much about positioning, timing, or knowing how to beat a creature. A momentary lapse in concentration or even being unlucky can get you killed in Freedom or Freedom Unite, but in 3U, it often gets you a light Chinese wrist burn. And of course, that simple comparison leaves out the huge fact that you can upgrade your defense in later games, so hits are even more trivial. It's true that you could upgrade defense in 2nd gen games like Freedom Unite as well, but creatures hit even harder in that game's G rank compared to Monster Hunter Freedom. And in 3U, you actually start with a free 50 defense without any armor on at all, making your defense total even higher and making no armor runs much more viable. Some of the system changes in 3rd generation games were good ideas, but implemented very poorly. Monster stamina, more random movement patterns, and charms are big offenders here. In Freedom Unite, that Tigrex is trying non-stop to rip your face off. He does not rest in his efforts to ruin your day. But now, that poor little sucker just tires out after a few minutes, leaving him wide open to you smacking him all over. Given the increased damage output and lowered player damage, you can actually just run around him and wait until his fatigued periods to wail on him for almost risk-free damage. You can now beat a Tigrex without knowing how to fight Tigrex. Let that sink in.
Now this one was really interesting to me because, you know, anytime Monster Hunter Discourse and difficulty and everything comes up, you have people that will hand wave it away and be like, oh, this happens every single time. Remember exhaust, or remember mounting, or remember styles, like all these different things. Well, like, as far as like exhaust goes, it makes sense. Like, kind of like free damage windows and free times where the monsters slow down and they're not as oppressive. Like, naturally, yeah, that sounds... It's just another aspect of potential ease for monsters that would normally just be oppressive 24/7. But the consideration of someone could just tire a monster out by just running around them and they can get the damage window. And it didn't really hit me, like this statement didn't really hit me until I thought about low rank Yangaruga, because I was fighting for you low rank Yangaruga, and it was easily the like most oppressive monster I've fought so far, like even up to high rank right now.
Sure.
And it would just like constantly spam attacks and do all, it was just a pure crackhead energy. But it got tired fast. And when it got tired, it wasn't just like still attacking, it stood completely still and was panting and salivating. And like I started smashing its head in, and I was like, this is before I even saw this video. I was thinking to myself, oh wow, you could probably just wait until it gets tired over and over again if you're having trouble with it.
Yeah, it's a legitimate strategy for sure. And exhaust, when it was first introduced in 3rd gen, monsters stayed exhausted for longer than they do in 4th gen. I'm pretty certain. Again, I don't have exact numbers, but I don't know that that's so. Like, for example, you could use flash palms on Rathalos in 2nd gen, and the amount of options he's working with to deal with you go down in a similar way to exhaust in 3rd gen. And they also, in 3rd gen, that's when they made the trap resistance changes, where like trap effectiveness from items starts to go down. It's not to say that like all forms of trapping got worse. You still have like sleep bombing, and obviously like paralyzing into a KO became more effective because I believe impact damage does exhaust damage, and so that kind of like loops into itself. So yeah, it is a way the games got easier, but I don't know that it's necessarily. There are ways to also make the game easier in second gen that aren't as effective in third gen. So I'm not sure it's as even of a player power increase. I think to some degree, yeah, monsters got weaker and players got more powerful, but like to what extent, it's hard to evaluate. Part of this is, so to give my sort of stance on where games are, like which games are difficult and less difficult. The game, so he did play Portable Third, and there was it's kind of hard to evaluate whether or not Portable Third is easier than 3 Ultimate, because there's some things that are harder. Again, it's just tricky to evaluate difficulty in general, but Portable Third's on the easier end of things in terms of progressing through it. And so coming off of like Portable Third, I'm sure after seeing Portable Third and 3U go in this direction of making the monsters, giving the monsters more disadvantages and giving the player more advantages, like I'm sure that might have been a motivating factor for Maze. But evaluating the not just the end of game difficulty and like actually knowing what you're doing type of difficulty, it's hard to say whether or not a player abusing the mechanics that would make second gen easier would have an easier time than people abusing the exhaust in third gen. I don't know where you would really draw the line on that.
True, it's very hard to measure. I just going back to something you were talking about earlier with the flash pods, I heard like in first and second gen, flash pods would actually keep monsters standing still as opposed to like fighting back. Is that true?
Well, I mean, no. They had a limited number of attacks they could perform, and yes, they would taunt occasionally. So the Rathless and Rathian were probably like the biggest, the monsters who were most exploitable when they got flashed. And if you're playing something like a bowgun, you could probably stand out of range of all their attacks and hit them pretty reliably. Now, that's not to say that they were defenseless. Like, yeah, so it's the same thing with like exhausted monsters aren't necessarily defenseless and they're going to taunt more. It's in a similar vein. And there are monsters, obviously there are some monsters you can't flash, like Fatalis or Lao Shanlong, if we wanted to bring up like a siege monster. Not to say that, to talk about the difficulty of either of those two. Depending on what you flash, so like there's some second gen monsters, like if you were to flash Rajang, he is going to go flying all over the map. And if anything, sometimes flashing him makes him more difficult if you're trying to damage him. Because all of a sudden he's not targeting you and he is throwing out moves and he is moving in different directions without having a particular intention. Not to say that they are sentient or anything, but like it's not targeted towards the player. It's not moving relative towards the player. It can make things very dangerous and very unpredictable. And I guess in that sense, yeah, exhaust pretty evenly nerfs monsters, maybe with the exception of Devil Joe and the monsters that can't be exhausted. At the same time, they added pin attacks in third generation. Some of those pins go through guard as a player who has a shield. And some of those pin attacks lead into like different attacks, like Rathless will fly back and fireball you. And those will instantly cure the exhaust. So depending on how like unlucky or lucky you are, yeah, you can sometimes get, if you're positioned poorly, you get pinned instantly. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with a monster that's no longer exhausted and has similar uptime. Yeah, so again, it's kind of like the whole wounds and focus strike thing, right? So yeah, wounds on most monsters are like, they keep them in place. They let you do some free damage. At the same time, monsters are going to have different health in Wilds. They're gonna have different health in 3 Ultimate. So like the time to kill while exploiting those things. Let's say you're fighting I don't know, a Rathalos in both 3 Ultimate and Freedom Unite. So Freedom Unite's definitively a portable game. Rathalos doesn't have as much health. If they have like the same number of enrages and the same amount of time that they spend not exhausted, and then on top of that you added the time that you did deal damage and that it was exhausted, is that a more difficult fight? I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
Some players would say, like some people would say no, because you snuck in some free damage. If that mechanic didn't exist, then, or if it existed, or if they had the same stats between the generations, then it would be a nerf. It's, I don't know, it's very subjective. And I know I'm kind of in between on that, but like, it's the same thing with, yeah, it's just, for Maze, it's like, okay, these things are getting easier, therefore the games are getting worse, right? Like, it's the part of it is Monster Hunter sucks now, you know? Yeah, some parts of the game are, like, some elements of the game are getting easier in different circumstances. Sure, like, I can see that. But does that inherently make it worse? Not necessarily. It depends on what you value. And like it's very clear that I mean, I really like the fights in second gen and the emphasis that they put on things. I'm in a very similar boat to Maze in terms of what I like and dislike. 3U is probably one of, not to say it's a bad game, it's not my favorite game in the series. It's probably around the same, it's probably in the same ballpark as Monster Hunter Freedom 1 is. It's not a bad game, and there are people who really love it. I just happen to like the way that fights are handled, and it's clear that Maze does not like the way that fights were handled in 3 and feels more strongly that that's definitively making things worse. And that's where we're kind of at with some of the shifts between World and Rise and World and Wilds. There are people who really like the way World introduced them to the series, and they really like the way that World had structured its progression, structured its player power scaling, structured its fights. And now that Wilds has, and by extension, Rise had different points that like different distribution of challenges, different things that it was emphasizing. They're like, no, this sucks. And yeah, I mean, they're allowed to, like, sure, you can think that if you value those things, but like I don't know, I'm not as staunchly a defender of like, okay, we gotta revert everything back to second gen.
Yeah. And like thinking about like all these additional things being added in and changes. I mean, even in terms of time to kill, and like even with the differences in player power and like whether we're talking speedrun times or even casual hunting, if we're not taking into account like runtime, like having to chase the monster on foot or track them, things like that, the kill times are relatively similar between World and Wilds in a lot of ways. Yet Wilds has stronger status weapons that can CC more often, focus strikes, wounds, all these different things. Then sure, like you could say like World had the flash pot spam and everything.
Yeah, it's again like, so let's say that World, let's give an example. Like, let's say, for argument's sake, that World's monsters cart you on average like one more time per hunt than Wild's monsters do when progressing through the main game. Does the fact that you carted make the game necessarily more difficult? Like, yeah, you're technically closer to the failure condition, but if you're not failing on average the same number of times, is that how we're evaluating difficulty?
Yeah, exactly.
I respect players that are frustrated, you know, with the way things are going, but at the same time, there are so many nuances to that conversation that get lost, and yeah, I can see the argument for like, Tigrex in particular is a monster that you'll see a lot of players be like, wow, I don't know why this monster exists. It just charges all the time. And that's been a core element of its identity. And for the games where exhaust is really prevalent, yeah, it does impact Tigrex's tempo and its pacing a pretty substantial amount. And so for that, like, again, for that monster in that context, sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean, again, the game as a whole is easier. And it is a shame, because I really do like Tigrex's fight in Freedom 2 and Freedom Unite. But that's also because, number one, the defense formula is different, and I think he uniquely interacts with the limitations of the player and the mechanics that the game has, that like he just hasn't updated in the same way to meet the more modern options. And some monsters are going to update to the player's options better or worse. It just varies on a monster by monster basis.
That makes sense.
Because again, like exhaust, yeah, sure, like Devil Joe gets exhausted, and now all of a sudden you're inflicted with defense down.
It gives them room
It's
to
an
play
interesting
around with different
perspective.
things.
Yeah, it gives them more balancing points, and while I do prefer, like, I do prefer simpler times in some regards, it's also cool to see, like, it gives them a lot of potential to mess around with things and grow. And they have, like, exhaust has been tweaked numerous times. The meats with the interaction of the meats with exhaust is far more interesting than the original interaction with monsters and meat, where you had to make sure the creature wasn't aware of you in order for them to eat. Yeah, there's some give and some take on that end. But anyway, yeah, we can continue.
Alrighty.
Monsters did eventually begin to feel a bit robotic in earlier games once you learned their patterns, and the response was to randomize movesets more, and to add more moves that tended to hit you more easily for less damage. Not being able to bait a monster into certain actions to exploit, and taking damage in some cases unavoidably, has the effect of lowering the skill ceiling. And with the slight increase in monster HP, you get into what usually amount to longer, more annoying battles. You're not in any danger of getting killed unless you take a series of heavy hits, and the battles can drag on because even skilled players can't reliably force a creature to act a certain way. Attacks like Legicrus's turn it underwater backhand are a good example of this. After he's attacked and he's turning to you, he'll sometimes throw in a slight backhand that doesn't do much damage but has fair range. He doesn't always do it either. So you either get close to exploit his turning frames, or you always play it safe and avoid the damage, but you drag the fight out further. It's not a huge deal, but it changes the dynamic of fights. In second generation, players are able to knock out creatures for the first time. A certain number of head hits from an impact weapon would dizzy a creature, allowing a number of free hits thereafter. It was not overly difficult for an experienced player, but still very easy for headshots to connect with the creature's neck if you turn in a way that you weren't expecting, or if you didn't position well for a super pound attack. In third generation, hammer impacts actively seek out the head. Spamming super pounds or hunting horn super pounds near a creature is an easy way to KO it, as the hits will register on the head if they possibly can. There used to be some creatures it was a challenge to knock out, like Rajang, with a small head, high KO tolerance, and fast movement, not to mention no fatigue system, but now it's another player skill that's drastically reduced. The charm system ties into the above notes about armor skill.
Pause it real quick before we get into charms. It's interesting that, again, this is where, like, something to one player can be an objective improvement, and something to another player can be a loss of skill expression. So hit registration for impact weapons is different in second generation and third generation. It is a little tricky, and the way the hammer's hit registration would work is it's usually further up towards the top of the hammer. So your spacing has to be a little bit different. I'm not necessarily opposed to changing up, like, how a weapon like where weapons attack hits on a creature, and how the damage is registered and what status effects results because of it. But like you'll get some arguments against when people go back to play Gen 1 and Gen 2, you'll find a lot of people who will say the games are clunky, and that's usually a descriptor of usually that just tells me the person isn't used to the way that certain things interact. It's not the way that they would expect it to interact. And so making things like hammers impact hit register more effectively, I don't know that that's necessarily like I wouldn't necessarily describe that as a bad change, but it's just one of those things where the games are going to feel different because of it, and you're going to get some pretty polarized sides when it comes to preferring how a weapon feels in, like, depending on the game you're playing. Worm stake is a huge. Did you play a lot of Gunlance and World?
I played some wide and some normal. I didn't really touch long.
Okay, so the worm stake has been tweaked every single game and in the expansions because they usually add shortcuts for the worm stake. Which body part of the worm stake prioritizes changes, which like how long it lingers after the move is pulled out changes, how much further up it is on the Gunlance changes. It is a very bizarre, like, it has some very bizarre hit registration interactions. And I wouldn't necessarily describe, he's making the argument that those hit registrations, when they're being made more consistent, it takes less skill to execute things reliably. And again, it's true, but it also makes certain interactions more accessible and makes things more consistent all around. It depends on whether or not you value those sort of niche, like, use cases. Like, it was cool that the stake dropped in World and it could land on a body part and all of a sudden do, like, massive damage. So it's also cool that it has a weeder bug where you could, like, put down a snowman and, like, duplicate the number of ticks that the worm stake had. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
Like, those interactions are neat. But I don't know that, like, I think it's a little unreasonable to expect the games to not eventually change up how that works, you know?
Yeah, and especially since they have things like data to see who all's playing what.
Yeah.
And, like, changing something in a certain way increases the amount of people playing the weapon. Like, that's something to look at, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of his... I think it's one of his weaker points, but I can understand why he's making it.
Yeah.
Is the long and short of it.
Yeah, I mean, it at the end of the day, it boils down to the higher skill ceiling kind of deal. You know, like, the skill expression of being able to land your hits consistently in harder to reach places without having the game magnetize you to it. Like, that kind of appeal, of course, would resonate with someone who is, you know, a speedrunner and looking to have some form of mastery over the game and its mechanics. And
and you can understand, like, why they would, if they were expecting. This is where I think expectations can make or break a player's response to the game. Like, it's very clear. So the second generation and the first generation, not to say that the games are exactly the same, but they had a very similar art style. There wasn't as, like, Tri was a very radical shift in a very similar way to how World was a very radical shift in gameplay mechanics, in art style, in all sorts of things, sound design even, and some players are going to be expecting based on previous experiences something similar to the experience that they really liked, and if it doesn't line up with that, they're gonna be very frustrated. It's why when Wilds is different, like, and to be fair, it is also partially a marketing like thing for Wilds, because Wilds, at least from the outside looking in, was marketed as being similar to World and shares a lot of foundational stuff with World in a way that Rise didn't.
Return to World. Return to World.
You know?
It'll get you ready for Wilds.
So when the game, when players go in with that expectation and the game isn't exactly similar, this is why we end up in these spots where you have a subset of the community that's just like, no, it's not at all what I wanted or what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's good, you guys? Quick disclaimer. We are about to go on a large discussion about title updates, modern Monster Hunter, and how it rolls out content, and the expectations that build up between people that come in, you know, at the end of an update cycle or at the end of a DLC cycle for a previous game and then going into the next base game. If this discussion has been beat to death in a lot of other videos, if you're not interested, you want to get back to the old gen shenanigans, time card is on the screen. Please skip to that. We do talk a little bit about some old gen stuff, but it mostly is new gen in this little section. It's definitely funny, you know, expectations and all. You know, like there's a large section that is not very vocal and not very active in like online forums and everything. And there are people that were there for the various launches in New Gen, and they know that every single time some of the best content is always produced in the title updates. And the title updates look very different from each other. Like, we have confirmation that there's going to be multiple title updates for Wilds, and Rise got rid of all of its content, burned through it in 2 title updates, and then blue-balled us until Sunbreak. And like there's just so many different like elements to these launches. And
yeah, the modern titles in particular, because of the way that they're structured, if you were joining at the end of Sunbreak or the end of Iceborne, and you don't have the context of like what how they typically handle base games and how content rolls out, it can be pretty jarring. That's not to say that I necessarily agree with all of the way Wilds has and is currently handling the rollout of its content, but at the same, like, it'd be even more jarring if I didn't know, or if I hadn't seen World go through its updates like twice over on console and PC, and then same thing with Rise. Like, those players aren't drawing from that, aren't really seeing that transition. And the older games did have title updates. I know a lot of people are like, oh, title updates are brand new to World. No, there were, the PS2 games were patched. The Monster Hunter G and Monster Hunter 2, we know mechanically changed over time in a very similar way to not necessarily the same scale, but in a similar way to how the base game of Monster Hunter World is not the same as the game that you currently buy on shelves with the Clutch Claw DLC.
Yeah.
Console Monster Hunter in particular has always been this weird, or I should say mainline Monster Hunter has always been this weird, somewhat live service, but not exactly live service game.
I have also heard of the monsters that are locked down behind events that are on the cartridge already, but just made available later.
And there were episodic quests in for Ultimate that took a while to roll out, and there was a difference in release dates for the regions and pacing for the events. If you were to go, so I was playing Monster Hunter 2 before the servers came out. There were a total of, hang on, I want to say like 6 monsters or 7 monsters that I couldn't fight before the servers came out. And then on top of that, when the servers did come out, which would have been the experience of players. Like, so the official servers opened, should have been like February 16th, 2006. The first time you would have been able to fight White Fatalis was 3 months in, 2 months in, somewhere around there, on May 6, 2006. And granted, it also has additional unlock requirements, so not all the players have been eligible to fight it. And then later they would add, May 27th, they would add Goldrathian, an event for Goldrathian, and then an event for Silver Rathlos on May 30th. And they've rolled out other events over time. But it took time. There was time that players spent without access to everything available, which is not the same as the constantly rotating festivals that you have on Iceborne right now.
Yeah.
I guess the closest thing that you would have would be like the week cycles with Kolv and Safi.
Yeah. Well, even Iceborne didn't do that until the end of its cycle, its life cycle.
Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah, same thing with releasing like some of the post game adjustments.
And the events and stuff as well, making them completely available and stuff.
I think they did some last minute adjustments to the guiding lands and the melding pot because of the game wrapping up too.
Yeah, there was a Shaver Jewels implementation, and guiding lands at launch was very, very different than like the hotfix that came before
that was
first title update. And funny enough,
it's
there was
always
only
funny when we it's so funny when we get into these end game conversations about like Wild's end game being rough, because my goodness, the guiding lands was
like I was one of the like 2 to 3 million that was playing on launch of Iceborne, and I farmed guiding lands before the hotfix, and that shit was terrible.
Well, I had friends that like it was a game breaker for some of my friends. I had friends that didn't come back and didn't experience the end of Iceborne because the guiding lands was just too much of a mess for them to engage with.
Yeah.
And
that's part of my beef with the title updates, right? Like the first experience for people can be completely and utterly like tainted because of it. Whereas like some people, they get like the best version of this thing all prettied up and polished up with a whole year's worth of changes, buffs, nerfs, whatever. And all you're left with is the memory of what it once was. And like a lot of people are experiencing that for the first time with Wilds right now. But for World, for Iceborne, for Rise, for Sunbreak, there's been little bullshit spread throughout the entirety of New Gen for me. And like World's base game was dog shit RNG, not very much variance in what you could hunt. A lot of the hunts weren't even super fun, to the point where you would even like actively avoid them, like Kushala. They supplement this end game grind by providing a different end game grind with a weapon pool of like 400 plus lottery weapons, most of them that don't even matter to any of what you would be using. So another added element of RNG.
It's funny because he's about to talk about he's about to touch on talismans in this video.
Yeah.
And when you're like, oh, the weapon lottery from Kolv, for me the weapon lottery from Kolv is substantially better than the loot tables for guild or the 140 quests in 4 Ultimate.
Like as far as relic weapons go?
As far as relic weapons go, yes. But that's because so for Kolv, in order to get, like when we're talking about endgame systems, in order to get those weapons, you have to do Kolv, right? And yes, it can be really annoying to not get the weapon you want from the giant loot table pool for a limited time hunt. At the same time, I would, in 4 Ultimate in particular, the most effective strategy to getting relic weapons and armor was sometimes just to save your game when the rare little pop-up pops up for your 140 quest and just mine things and either finish the quest. I don't think you have to clear it even. You could probably just die, I think, and retain it. And charm farming in Generations Ultimate is pretty similar.
Coal miners needed.
Yeah. And
the thing is, like, the difference is, like, coal miners needed, you could do it reliably with, like, a group that any group you would find, and it would still be rather, like, fine.
Yeah,
whereas,
I
like,
just
cool was, like,
I just
16 player groups.
Yeah. I just don't like incentivizing. I would rather incentivize gameplay over
A single hunt.
literally resetting on a single quest and not really focusing on the main objective of that quest.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily mind. It's weird because it's certainly arbitrary on my end, but like for whatever reason I don't mind mining for rust stones. in Gen 1 and Gen 2. Number 1, because it's fixed which rust stones are which weapons you get from the rust stones. But also because they're usually a complementary system and they don't require you to do they required you to be in specific areas, but it's not restricting you to like a particular subset of hunts. And it makes like fighting Lao Shan in Dose, and I think they also drop from either Ashen or Shen, but like they make some of those siege fights that players aren't as big a fan of. They give extra rewards for those, so like I think it's a decent add-on to those. It's not exclusive to those things. Like if it was exclusive to grinding out Lao, then I'm sure people would have a much bigger issue with it. Granted, Dose also has subquests, so you could just subquest out if you had a subquest cycle. But yeah.
True.
But yeah, it's certainly an arbitrary like, hey, I don't like this, but for whatever reason, yeah, it bothers me. It's more that like you have to do that, and then you are subjected to a table that is substantially longer than Culves. Like if I want to get Gunlands, it's been a while since I've looked at the tables, but like the things that can be modified on the Gunlands are its element, its raw, its shelling type, its shelling level, its affinity.
Sheesh.
And then like I feel really bad for bowguns because like I'm sure there are bowgun template tables, but like trying to find a good bowgun with the right ammo types, and then I don't know if they do the distinction between folding or not folding in for Ultimate. Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at the tables, but yeah, the probability is just so low. It's the same thing that Maze will bring up with getting the probability of getting a
good charm.
Perfectly optimal charm. Those gripes, like charms, are something that I think uniquely affects players who are looking to min-max.
Yeah. And definitely like a lot so in old gen where a charm could make or break a whole like build setup.
Yeah, like you quite literally couldn't. There are some things you just can't do without a charm.
Yeah. Whereas like in Rise, like even if you were looking for a quick sheath two slaughter for like your longsword play, you would have to sacrifice like one attack up to run just another level of protect polish, so you wouldn't have your perfect DPS build.
I was just about to say the difference in output is quite literally, for some builds, 0 and 100, whereas in the modern skill system, it's like, oh, I'm going from probably like at the worst case scenario, like 95 to 100, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not there's a reason. So if you look at or if you've checked out my channel at all, there's a reason that I only speedrun demos and arena quests is because I don't like dealing with all of the additional. I think that these RNG systems that they add incentivize two things: either spending a ton of time, which is great for players who like having a reason to spend a ton of time, or they incentivize cheating.
Yeah.
And there were some cheaters back in the day, even in old gen games, but like just look at the leaderboard.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who wants to get their jollies off by being the best, even though they cheated.
Yeah, and I feel bad for all of the speedrun category moderators who are trying to moderate anything on PC, like, and the degree to which people have cheated too, like, it just seems like such a massive headache. But I disagree. Like, there was a post, I don't remember who it was from somebody who had said, "Oh, this is what you get if you give players everything that they want for their build." I disagree with builds being the only type of way to structure your, like, making builds fully randomized and to optimize them, to have a huge grind to optimize them. I disagree with that being the only way to make an effective endgame system that retains players. It is a method and it works for some people. But personally, it just does not. I don't think it incentivizes healthy habits. And I think there are other ways to extend out a game's playtime. I mentioned in the last episode, like, I think the guild card is really cool. I think they could give you more unlocks that were tied to the guild card. Like, Rainbow Pigment is one of my favorite and that was implemented when colors were implemented in 2nd gen armor pigments in Monster Hunter 2. Armor pigments used to be tied to achievements. You used to have to do something in the game. You had to accomplish something beyond the base progression most of the time to change up a color of your armor to the color that would have been unlocked through said achievement. And unlocking all the colors would give you the rainbow pigment, and this is really cool. Yeah, there are different ways you can play with post-story progression outside of saying, hey, let's introduce like what's effectively like a gacha machine, you know?
Yeah. Now, there are a lot of people that are like crying for more RNG and everything. And like, there's always like a different push and pull. People found Sunbreak's grind with the anomaly system to be too much, even though it guaranteed upgrades. And for those that like may be confused because maybe you hopped on Sunbreak after all the title updates were done, leveling your anomaly rank from 220 to 300, how long that takes, that was how long it took every single level if you were playing from title update to title update. It was a horrific grind. And even the augments changed. The augments on the weapons got stronger in later title updates. It wasn't until like title update like 3 or 4 that they made it to where getting slot upgrades also gave you sharpness and raw and whatever else was on there as well. Like, everything about you got stronger, which lets you handle the fights quicker. And also, every single time you handle a fight, you also level faster. Like, everything is just expedited. And it's just it's nuts. Like, even comparing playing title update to title update, because I did both. I played title update to title update on Switch, and then I played like the completed product on Xbox. 100% difference the anomaly grind was. In fact, I even ended up completing the anomaly grind on Xbox. I never did for Switch. And that's like another aspect of that, like being able to relate to people playing on launch or playing whenever the product is done. You know, the people playing Iceborne now aren't playing with the unbuffed like twice Clutch Claw without Shaver Jewel. They get to play with a better version of Guiding Lance that also has 2 more extra areas in it.
Well, I mean, yeah, for guarding weapons, they can meld the shield decoration. For bow, they can take the mighty bow jewel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
They have like
yeah,
new
it's a very good
decos like
save.
safe landing that still gives you iframes but lets you skip the laydown. That can be useful in some categories. I actually used it for a Alatreon, no augments, no RNG decos, no Fatalis armor, no element weapon run for one of my videos in the past. There's just like so many new things that they have to play with. Base world even, like people, when people talk about what's their favorite part about these games, they're oftentimes listing post-launch content. Rise, they hop in base Rise, you know, and some people will be like, well, they completed the game, you know, with the title updates, at least that, you know, that's kind of fair because of COVID. It's like, sure, but they didn't have to also drip feed the decorations you can make. They drip fed Red Eye decos, they drip fed attack decos, they drip fed Wex decos and Grit Boost decos. You couldn't make those on launch. Your HR was capped at HR 7. It didn't matter if you put in 900 hours or you put in 2 hours. You were going to be the same result no matter what if you completed the game by the time the next title update hit. And kind of probably to gate you being able to progress your HR too much because they locked Camilius behind HR 20. They locked Kushala between HR 30, Teostra between HR 40, Allmother at HR 50, like so on and so forth. Like they did all these little weird missteps that kind of burned people a little bit. And
Yeah, and part of that is, so it's the tricky spot that I think the developers are very clearly still trying to iron out with the title updates is what I wish they would delay the games, honestly. But
honestly, but it just doesn't make monetary sense for them to not roll out the title update system.
As a company, I understand it. But like, what is withholding too much? Because obviously Rise is affected by the pandemic.
Yeah. And like people hated Rise. Like it wasn't as popular to bash on it like in mainstream media like Wilds is, but people hated Rise. Every single time Rise did something, they would nitpick. Every event quest. Why is this giving us nameplates? Where's my event? Where's my Black Eagle charge blade? Where's my cool Witcher crossover? You know, like there's every single step Rise took, people hated on it. Sunbreak didn't escape that ire either. But now we have people that are, well, Rise was great on launch, way better than Wilds is on launch, and like all these different things. It's nuts. It's nuts to me.
Yeah. It's I don't know. They'll have to, for whatever game follows up Wilds, they'll have to figure out they'll have to refine what they decide is worthy of being on the initial title update and what needs to be in the game. I do think that having the Gathering Hall in particular for Wilds, I would have much preferred that to be in the base game than that to be a title update.
Yeah.
But I also understand if they were backed up on, or if they are focused on like performance optimization, or if they didn't have a good release schedule, which I mean they didn't for the games that preceded before it, but like if they didn't have post-launch plans fully set in stone, I understand why they were like, okay, well, we need to have something to make to tie people over, you know, to mix up things. And in the end of the day, it really didn't affect me. Like, even though I would have preferred it to be in the base game, it didn't really affect me all that much. But that's because Adam, Chaos, and I are very dumb, and we decided to craft. I mean, I've done 2 playthroughs, but we decided to craft every single piece of gear.
Yeah.
Which most players aren't, like, again, most players aren't going to have that experience. Like, they're not going to do that sort of playthrough. But, like, by the time the Gathering Hall rolled around, I wasn't even done finishing up did I finish up everything in low rank? I can't remember. I don't think I was. But yeah, it's, or at least on the one character. On the other character, I was a bit more flexible, so I could play with friends. Yeah, it'll be neat to see where they go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, concerning trends or not, hopefully, I mean, hopefully, they won't be able to pull the wool over like a massive swath of a new audience for this one, and like people will remember like different aspects of it and keep them accountable. Because as of right now, the whole thing about the short-term memory loss of like them getting away with choices that they made and things that they did only to be like rewarded and like patted on the back for like the finished states of these games after years of extra post-launch updates and content and all these different things. It's frustrating to see. And it's like the main criticism for title updates is the whole concept of it shouldn't be used to complete the game. It should be used to just kind of add cherries on top or to supplement what's already there.
It should, yeah. So it should at launch feel worth the cost of what you've paid for it.
Yeah.
And be a complete game. Like, how to describe this? Even though, so again, if we were to go further back in Monster Hunter's history, even though the events for monsters rolled around later because they were planned later, they existed on the disc in the code. Most of them anyway. The games were fully developed for the most part. The patches that existed on PS2 games were primarily mostly to address issues, unforeseen issues, but like issues nonetheless. It's gotten to the point where it's not how to describe it. And we have conversations around endgame, but like I'm not sure if progression wasn't quite as quick in the base game. Not to talk about its difficulty, but like if it wasn't quite as quick, then you wouldn't need a necessarily comprehensive endgame or a comprehensive endgame at launch. Like you'd still expand out the endgame with the title updates, but like to launch Wilds without Zoshia, the story, like where does the story go? Like I know at least with their defense with Rise, it's like, hey, pandemic messed things up. We intended to have this thing with Narwa, you know? And to World's credit, it did have Safi Jiva. Not that I think Safi at launch, like it's not exactly what I want out of a story ending boss, but it was a story ending boss, you know?
Wait, Xenojiva, you mean?
Oh yeah, Xenojiva. Sorry, I'm getting them two flipped.
No, you're good.
And I think thematic, like, so at the very least, even though it's not gameplay wise what I want out of a final boss, it thematically it does fit like the whole Sapphire Star like shenanigans that they were setting up.
Yeah. The bioenergy and all that.
Yeah, whatnot. Yeah. It'd be nice if whatever like future title. It'd be nice for it to not have these issues. The problem is Wilds is already sold really well.
Yeah. And it's given trends for Monster Hunter as of like the past 7 years, it's going to sell way more as well.
Yeah, I was just hoping, I think as a consumer, and it's naive, but I was hoping that because it's their it was their best-selling title, World having been, that they would want to capture and retain as large of an audience as possible.
Yeah.
And it seems like the priorities weren't quite there on that end. It was more short-term minded on, well, this is a successor to our best-selling game. We're going to make it look like the best-selling game aesthetically, and then get it out to make our financials, like financial record, seem good.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest issue though is that I think they're gonna get away with it again. And
they might. Well, we'll see.
Well,
But
it's not just like even like just like doom and gloom. Like it's actual statistics, like based on their current trends. World actually, as glazed as it was, World was like a lot of people were indifferent towards it initially. Like it sold really, really well. I mean, at this point, we know even less than half of the player base at any given platform even beat HR Xeno'jiva. But the thing about World was it was oddly like people were oddly apathetic towards things like Iceborne, despite them following the same trends that they would follow with Rise and Sunbreak, where they would sell it as a pack with the base game and the DLC together for like the same price, like $60 together. They even put it on like Game Pass, like they did all sorts of different things. And we see that in the span of 7 months, it took them that amount of time to sell 5 million copies of Iceborne in the span of 7 months. And that was with 15 million base copies of World sold. Rise Sunbreak, at that same time period, in the span of 7 months for Sunbreak, also sold 5 million. But at that point, only 12 million people had bought the base game of Rise. So like there's like a weird like apathy that happened with Iceborne and with World as a whole. And Iceborne wouldn't like, it would triple its sales off the backbone of being put on sale during Sunbreak and during Return to World campaign. So it was literally, and it was attributed in Capcom like reports to smart sales. They literally called them smart sales as to the success of like World. It was like a posthumous like hype and success that has literally doubled the base game and tripled the DLC sales. Like not people that were playing it at launch or people that were buying it while it was actively being updated. And even like there were sales during that time period too, like summer sales, Black Friday sales, like so many different things. Like there were sales during that time period, but it was during these specific hype moments, capitalizing either off of their next game or capitalizing off of the hype for the game that was going to come after, that really increased those sales. I think that Wilds is going to do the same thing. I think they're already doing that kind of with Rise and Sunbreak a little bit. Like if the trend continues and Rise Sunbreak like also even gets close to doubling their sales, I think they're going to pull that off with Wilds no problem. It's tantalizing selling whenever the DLC drops. They're going to be selling Wilds and the DLC together in the same pack, given the same trend. People will be buying that, new players will be coming in, and they'll be experiencing the base game with a fresh coat of paint, ideally with some better performance. Hopefully, if they can't nail that down, that's going to be the fate ender. They're not going to be able to pull that same like posthumous success if the game doesn't work. But
it's a tricky balancing act when it comes to reception.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rise was utterly hate. Like literally the rhetoric people use to discuss Wilds, how it's killing the franchise, how there's no hope Rise would ever even get better. Even Sunbreak didn't help it. Like now you have people going back and it's like, oh, I treated you too harshly. Now, the only thing I can think of is if they just completely U-turn and they decide, okay, this time we'll actually make like a grounded Monster Hunter, keep it simple, make it similar to World. Like that's the only thing I could think of, like U-turn wise, that it will be like an actual organic draw for people. But given that it's going to not be more than likely a mainline title, like numbered title, it's not likely that that's going to happen completely. So if it's another experimental game, there's going to be people that are going to dislike it. Like there's going to be other things. And then they're going to be selling Wilds for like $35-$40 along with the DLC. And they're going to be like, maybe you should try it. And at that point, years worth of free content, years worth of updates, years worth of polish. It's just going to be a night and day difference between the game that we got on launch and the game that these people are going to experience on sale. And they're gonna be like, yeah, this game was better than I thought. And that's the whole thing about like the voices getting drowned out. Like even the people that are critical of the games whenever they drop, they sometimes like shut up and they just hop on the next hate part. Like there's still like old gen fans that hated on World still hating on it. but they're more so like worried about hating on Rise when it came out, or Wilds when it came out. Same thing with like Rise fans. Like there's Rise fans that came in, their game was getting treated the same way as Wilds currently is, and they're like, nah, Wilds is trash. And they're like with the World fans throwing stones. So whenever the World fans and them were throwing stones at each other at one point, it's just a big old mess. Like literally after World and its initial success and seeing like Rise and what happened to it, I didn't think that Monster Hunter was going to get any traction whatsoever in the next title. Like I thought it was done. Like I thought it was a one-hit wonder. Like,
so that, yeah, but that's where you're experiencing the discourse from the invested community, whereas I think the vast majority of players, not to say that they don't ever engage in talking about Monster Hunter, but like I think a good chunk of the players who play Monster Hunter will play the game and then for a bit with friends, maybe beat it, and then shelve it till either they see a title update or they see a new game come out, and then they pick it up again and just do whatever they do, you know?
yeah.
Like they don't
Well, it was also based on the sales and the Iceborne apathy. Like we just saw everything getting like lower and lower. And like with the negative reception Rise was getting, that would affect sales as well to a certain point.
What's interesting to me is how it's flipped historically, in that the portable games, handheld games, and now granted this is not true for all regions, but the portable games did quite outsell the home console games for the first two generations. And with the home console game being World, majorly outselling not majorly, but like a good chunk outselling Rise. It's interesting that there's less faith in the portable market for whatever the sequel to Wilds is than there was in anticipation for Wilds. Like,
yeah.
I hope that it would be, hope that it would outsell World. It's not to say that Rise didn't pop off in Japan, because it did. It's just interesting because, like, I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, but I'm assuming whatever follows Wilds, if it follows the trends, it could mix it up, will be a stylized lower performance game.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
I mean, Rise to some degree is stylized more than leans into a different style than.
Yeah, they use a lot of cell
Rise
shading,
do.
a lot of things like that.
Yeah,
saturated colors.
And so it'll be interesting to see if they can manage to create as big of a market for that, and how they go about handling that. And that's, again, part of the divide, I think. Part of the reason I think that Rise fans, a good chunk of Rise fans, aren't supportive of Wilds when they were getting bullied by World players is I'm sure Wilds' aesthetic reminds them more of World.
That and Wilds is also just too different. Like it's always like the things that are too different.
It's always, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, if they really valued the faster gameplay and the wire bugs freeform movement, I'm sure they would probably like maybe even enjoy something like Generations Ultimate more than the home console games.
Yeah, GU would be a good sell. It's like, you want a blast dash still? It's not good, but you could put it on a hunting art. You know?
You can pull off flashy stuff. It's still got that very exaggerated sort of attacks and aesthetic.
Yeah, and I think Rise and Sunbreak hit that like old world kind of it's specifically starting in 3rd gen, like that kind of goofy campiness that Monster Hunter was known for.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting because they kind of I kind of relate the games to being like, okay, well, this is more like 3rd gen, or this is more like pre-3rd gen.
Yeah, the maps are more simplistic, like more focused on being arenas rather than set pieces.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, are they focused on being an environment, or are they focused on assisting the combat in some way, or putting more emphasis on the combat in some way?
Yeah, and like as many people like wanted to bash Rise for not having like the endemic life like World did, I found it to be more interesting that you could use endemic life in combat scenarios, and like actually use it for like you have to remember where a stink leak is and grab it.
The amount of tools that you have to interact with things in Rise is kind of insane.
Yeah.
I mean, you had some degree of environmental traps, but like what those environmental traps did, I mean, it statused the monster or it staggered them.
Yeah.
Whereas like you can blight monsters now and granted those lead to some of those lead to stats like Thunderblade leading into KO.
Yeah.
But like yeah, it's more intricate interactions on that end. And you can see that I mean as you follow the history of the series, you can see that sort of division in priorities between the portable series and the home console series of games.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it, like Tokuda directed games pull a lot from like Western gaming companies, like so much. Like, not even just like the emphasis on more hyper realistic graphics, but just like little things like World quest board having a whole ass animation to get like to the quest board and out of it.
Yeah, that you can speed up with the run button.
Yeah. The heavy and more in-your-face storyline, while it's taking it a step further by railroading you Sony style and Ubisoft style. You know, you have every mission you're trailing someone and you can't walk away too far, else it'll be like, hey, you can't go too far, and it won't let you go mine the ore right next to you. Like literally everything is now a lot more people were like kind of upset about that, but it just shows like who they're copying their homework from. You know, like who are they looking at to copy from? They're looking at Sony Studios. They're looking at Ubisoft. They're looking at CD Projekt Red slightly. They cited the weird like stagnant cutscenes, like where everyone's like kind of have stilted animations after every normal cutscene, and you're just kind of talking, and it's the illusion of choice answers where they give you like 3 different options, but you basically get the same answer no matter what. They cited that was because people responded positively to the Witcher collaboration. Like little things like that. And like one thing that people responded positively towards, they implemented for every single mission, even title update monsters are tied to this point, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah, it's it is bizarre. They're definitely taking like the one thing I will give the development team, which isn't true for as many development teams, is they definitely seem responsive to feedback.
Yeah.
And to prioritize and to shift their priorities based on it. Like it's not just like, hey, we know that this is a concern. It's we are making changes based on what the landscape is looking like. I don't know exactly how they handle like different regions and like where the I know that the discourse is going to be different in different regions, but at the very least it's more than what you'd expect from again a company of that size.
Yeah. Now, we've been on the gaming industry and cells and um,
Yeah, a bit
Dev
far
team
away from the
plans.
initial
Yeah.
video.
We can continue with the video.
Drastically reduced. The charm system ties into the above notes about armor skills. Charms themselves are a fine idea, making armor sets more usable even with mediocre skills since you can now tailor them, but they're often too powerful or completely useless, and their random nature is full retard. You now engage in a massive time sink to grind for good charms, or accept that you have to get extremely lucky to get something great. Why didn't they make charms craftable? Why not let us make a +5 artisan charm or improve the points offered on decorations? Now your potential damage output can be higher than mine because you got a better drop or got into a better charm table. It's not like a rare drop currently. Something like a Rathlos mantle is about a 5 to 8% chance from any given G-rank Rathlos after you factor in carves, normal and break rewards. A specific charm? 0.00001% chance in portable third, and 0% chance entirely if you're not on the right charm table, which is in of itself a 6% chance. That's without mentioning how broken the charm tables are in 3U. The less said about that particular design failure, the better.
Pause. I'm curious how much you know about that.
About the charm tables in 3U?
Yes.
So it is one of like the few infamous like old gen isms that gets passed around to new geners as well. Is like the 3U charm table, especially if you were around base rise. The subject got brought up.
I was just about to say, because there was a brief period in Rise where something very similar happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the charm table is supposed to cycle, and you're supposed to pull from different tables in order to get different charms. And 3U's doesn't cycle. It's not the only time a major gameplay system like that has failed. Because it's very clearly not working as intended. Portable Thirds was working as intended. There was also, so in Monster Hunter 2, the Rust Stone or Shard, it's tabled to cycle when you were supposed to get a rusted weapon, wasn't cycling. It predetermined a pattern on boot and would reset when you reset the game, meaning it wasn't random at all. Just kind of similar to the way the charm table 3U wasn't random. And yeah, you can very clearly tell that he's a speedrunner. So he's like, yeah, if I want to max my gear, it's a massive. It really sucks, to have these pieces of equipment that would impact my speedruns being left up to chance, and for somebody who doesn't even speedrun to end up with better gear than somebody who dedicates a lot of time to it.
Yeah. How funny do you think it would have been for you to have been inside the room, just a fly on the wall, seeing Maze actually open up Monster Hunter World and see that craftable charms was a thing, but then see that all the decorations were RNG. What would it have been like?
I have no idea. I also don't know. He did engage with World. It's actually on his channel. I don't know what the overall thought process was, but again, it also, when I speedrun, this is the reason I just don't engage with those systems, unfortunately. There are plenty of hunts I would love to post competitive speedruns for that, like, I just can't because it started really that system of having a piece of equipment determined by RNG, not for crafting, but for like just outright obtaining from a table of like thousands. It started in 3rd gen. And again, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, I can understand why he's frustrated. It's trying to think how to put this. They were talking about the carve percentage chance for getting a particular drop. I think the lowest it's been in Gen 1 was like a 1% drop. It's interesting to me just how much the drops have been not to say like completely devalue, but they seem like they've fallen to the wayside, especially in wilds, where it's like, okay, well, here's
Guaranteed
we're
gem drop.
here's the guaranteed the gem drop. And having played through crafting everything, like doing a crafting everything playthrough, some of the crafting requirements are pretty steep. Like they require a lot of materials, but the materials drop fairly regularly.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's like been some testing on like there's some sort of psychological testing on like players who are just getting way too frustrated at not getting the rare drop. If something like that had contributed to it. But yeah, it's just interesting to me that people are, it seems at the very least that people are less bothered not getting a particular end game weapon as they are not getting a drop for like an armor set or a regular weapon that you'd craft using monster materials.
Maybe. I think it could be like an overeager design choice. Because when you think about it, it's foundationally built upon the investigation system from World, which also had like the gold, silver, and bronze reward boxes.
Yeah.
And it was very, very easy to get gem drops from quest reward or from the actual like investigation rewards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, even to the point where there was only one monster in the entirety of World and Iceborne that I had to really like focus farm to get their gem. And it was specifically Lunastra at her launch because I couldn't get an investigation for her. And it took me like 13 kills. Yeah, and I hated that fight so much. It took me 13 kills.
It's just fascinating to me that the grind was 13 kills because what was it called? But we were having a conversation in the old school Discord, and Adam couldn't get a Gypcero's head to drop in Monster Hunter 2. And it was something like he had gotten the kill 50 Gypcero's title, I'm pretty certain, before he had gotten his first Gypcero's head, and he needed 2 of them.
Wow. That's gonna be me. That's literally gonna be me when I play this game.
And so yeah, no, it's just interesting to me that there is a grind, and like where that grind is acceptable and where that grind isn't acceptable for people. But again, as a speedrunner, I can sympathize. It's rough.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, like, Worlds was kind of kept in check with there was still an RNG element to the extra rewards, but then there was an RNG element as well to getting the investigation period. Whereas in Wilds, maybe they could have gotten away with having the guaranteed gem drops if that was a rare thing you couldn't get very often. And if it wasn't so accessible.
I was just about to say, if it wasn't for the nature of, and I know Ludi got into huge drama on Twitter for saying this, if it wasn't for the nature of how those material investigations cycled, being you spend points rest to rest cycle. The reason, from what I understand, the reason he got into hot water because of it, like looking through the comments, was there was a number of speedrunners who were complaining that like, hey, they wanted to fight a monster of a particular difficulty, and if you remove it and force people to wait, it makes speedrunning, which is already rather on shaky grounds for some speedrunners for Wilds because of other factors, it's just nobody would want to do it. And I think you can have both. Like, I think there's a way to do both. I think if you're looking to farm, there's a way to consolidate, hey, the rewards that are bound to, and like you're able to search for specific monsters and monster difficulties, but the rewards are bound to the duration of time that you wait since, I don't know, last doing an investigation of that monster. Like, there's
Maybe a
certain things
spin-off
that you
of
could-
the Wyvern Prints. Like you could redeem a print to get a guaranteed gem reward for an investigation.
Yeah, and there were, so in Monster Hunter Freedom 2, maybe Freedom, there was you could exchange, so there was the Veggie Elder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can exchange guild card tickets for rare drops in second gen.
You could do it for GU too, but only for specific
Yeah.
monsters.
Yeah, and they had a smaller list of monsters back in second gen, so it was most of the relevant monsters that you could get the rare drops for. But like, yeah, you had to do a certain number of hunts, obviously, to get with friends to get to get those tickets, and to have a guild card of a particular caliber to get the better tickets. The way you would upgrade your guild card caliber or like background was to do more quests of the available more unique quests, not including the download ones on the base game. So the more content of the game you had completed, you could that's when you could unlock like the tickets that would get you the G rank what would be considered now mantles. They called them heavenly scales in the localized version of Freedom Unite. But yeah, again, there are ways to let speedrunners do speedrun things, and to also make seasons and like time more impactful for players looking to do material grind. Like, I think that'd be fine. But yeah, we'll see if they even stick with Seasons Beyond Wilds.
True.
I mean, it took them 19 years to bring back seasons from DOS, if you don't include Frontier. So it's been a minute.
It wouldn't be the first time they abandon a mechanic for the expansion.
Yeah. I mean, they introduce. There's a number of games that have unique mechanics. DOS is filled with unique mechanics. P3rd has some unique mechanics, or at least unique farm interactions. It depends on where you draw the line of like, okay, well, this has some similarities. But yeah, depending on... obviously, Underwater dropped after 3rd gen. And it'd be interesting if they brought back Underwater either for the next game or for the expansion of Wilds. But we'll have to see how bold they're going to be on that end. Or if they're just going to go in a completely new direction. They really seem to like going in new directions all the time.
It would be so funny if they doubled down, though, on the seasonal and rest mechanic.
Yeah, if they made... So, like, one of the things I was hoping for Wilds is they were like, oh, we want people to feel the power of nature. I wanted, like, full-on storm systems to be like, hey, if you don't respect the environment, it's gonna make things significantly harder.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we didn't quite... I guess... Aesthetically, it changes a lot, but it doesn't seem to mechanically have as major of an impact as I'd like it to. And granted that, again, it could change in Master Rank. It could change if they bring seasons back for the next game. But yeah, I was hoping it would be a bit more.
Could you imagine a spark storm in the oil well basin where you get blast blight for walking into like spark clouds?
Yeah. If they bring back Elder Dragons, it would be like it'd be a perfect way to elevate the environment. And they used to shift the weather. So Kshal used to shift the weather in its locales in 2nd gen. So if you didn't know, you weren't able to put down bombs when it was raining. And there was no like unnatural rain condition in the snowy mountains, but Kshal could also apply that effect in snowstorms in the snowy mountains, where it would snuff out the sparks, I guess would be the rationale behind not being able to put down regular bombs. You used to have to instead bring lightning rods, which were the environmental like equivalent of the bombs. Yeah, just those. I don't necessarily need it to like be carding players, but like just have some fun interaction that makes you go, whoa, this is like mix up the experience. Whoa, this is different. Whoa, I have to like actually recognize what time it is when I'm going to fight, I really do like, that's one of the things that, again, really sold Monster Hunter for me as a series, was the fact that there were certain points in the game where I had to step back a second and take a second to think before doing something. And so when they lean into that more, I think it enhances things.
I definitely think it would be interesting, like the concept of a monster, like a large monster retreating to its nest, not because it's injured, but because there's inclement weather. Like that would be definitely interesting. I'm also like crackpot dreaming of like the equivalent of a Jarkin or Rajang or something with hands that can carry you. Like you'd lure pod them in the middle of inclement weather, and the response is picking you up and scooping you and taking you to the nest with them. Like just absolute goofiness. Like how would like these little interactions work with each other?
And what's cool about Monster Hunter, or modern Monster Hunters, they have these, they're very detail oriented when it comes to the way monsters interact, both with the player and with the environment. And that's always been the case since day one. A lot of players, it actually leads to a lot of misunderstanding in the PS2 games, because a lot of players will attack a Rathalos like on site, or a Kutku on site, and their AI is actually programmed to respond differently if you're attacking them before they've noticed you. They get spooked.
Oh.
And so people get into this, like you'll see it happen all the time with Monster Hunter 1 village playthroughs, or even like early online playthroughs, where people will just run up and like get behind it and hit it, and then it'll fly off to another area, and they're like, wow, this monster flies a ton. And it's true, it does happen where they do zone a lot and they do fly a lot, but some people do make it worse on themselves. And it's always funny with that knowledge being like, yeah, I can understand that you're frustrated with this, but there's something in your control that you can do to make this much better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hardest part about it all. It's like people going in blind and they don't realize they're making things harder on themselves. And it really is a frustrating thing. And there's a lot of things in Monster Hunter that you can unintentionally make things way harder on yourself. And that can add to the frustration.
It's like people not realizing certain core mechanics, like and not sharpening at all. It'll happen a lot to beginners.
Yeah.
And the what is it called? The more recent titles, I think it's a little bit harder to figure out that, depending on the weapon class too. Like, you're playing dual blades and you figured out demon mode, but you haven't figured out sharpening, then the whole bouncing but not getting the recoil from the bounce is just a piece of feedback that, like, I think goes over some beginners' heads.
Yeah. Not listening for that dunk 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 dunk.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a really obnoxious and large visual effect, but that could just be, again,
maybe I'm hitting it really hard. That's why it's making that noise.
Maybe I need more damage. That's got to be it. It's got to be I don't deal enough damage. If only I could level up my character's strength stat. It's got to be.
So where's my firekeeper?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move to the video again.
You're also far safer at any given second while battling in 3U compared to Monster Hunter Freedom. Leaving aside the lower damage you take, you can slap a whole lot more defensive armor skills on too. The natural moment of invulnerability is longer and the hitboxes are tighter, so the timing you need to avoid attacks is pretty generous.
Now, he says the natural moment of invulnerability is longer.
He's talking about iframes, yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, no, the amount of iframes that you have from a roll is different. And there's also a difference between get up iframes that got changed. I'm pretty certain that got changed in 2nd gen. So let's say you got knocked over onto your butt from like a light hit in Freedom 1. And that light hit was like, I don't know, the monster doing like some trample damage, or I don't know, hitting you with like a little peck or whatever when you were guarding or what have you. And you fall on your butt, or fall all the way over and you get up. You do not have iframes, so you get a little bit of iframes now, like about the same amount of iframes as Evade 2 when you're standing up from getting hit. So you have not only the time to be actionable, but to like also reposition a little bit. Whereas in Freedom, let's say you get knocked over, you're standing up, and it's like a monster charges you again, or it's flying at you, or it's shooting a fireball. The only thing you can do is press a frame perfect input to dodge, if you have the stamina to do so, or to instantly block. Otherwise, you're just eating that hit. Like, they can combo you really, really hard. So it's not, the light moves tend to be more punishing as a result. So like light moves aren't just the little bit of damage you receive, it's also does that little bit of damage you receive and the knockdown transition into being put in a spot where you're getting followed up on. I do think it's funny that we're using 3 Ultimate as and comparing Freedom, because Freedom is definitively the easiest Gen 1 game. And now I said it's not like, I just talked about how difficulty wasn't that easy to evaluate, but Freedom is a portable game. It's intended to be soloed, and also has all of the other factors that make portable games easier. But it also didn't, like, its health values are set really low. I would argue that 3 Ultimate, while being probably around Freedom's level, I would argue it's harder than Freedom for a number of complexity factors. Like, there are some things about Freedom that are harder. We'll get to why a little bit later into the video. But it is interesting that he's comparing the two. But yes, get up iframes weren't originally implemented, just kind of like laying on the ground. Like all of those things that you take for granted in modern titles, they weren't. You shouldn't operate under the assumption that they were there from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, it's funny because I actually talk about the get up iframes in the difficulty video. And the other day I actually read a comment where someone was like criticizing the idea that I brought up get up iframes because it had always been present in Monster Hunter. And so color me surprised when I find out it was added in 4U. Or not get up iframes, so but like the delayed get up.
Lay down. Yeah.
Yeah, the lay
down. And for you also, like alongside the delayed get up, they also introduced monsters. It's the same thing with Exhaust, for example. They add things around, like when they do one of those mechanical shifts, they add things around that mechanical shift occurring. Like some monsters in 4 Ultimate will time attacks that you can dodge if you get up quickly, but if you lay on the ground too long, you'll get hit by them, like if you wait to the last minute. And vice versa, where if you don't lay on the ground, you will get hit, like the moment you stand up, like when you're getting to stand up, or are aimed to hit you when you're standing up. Obviously, you still have frames, actionable frames after you get up, so you can technically roll through things, but you know they're timed around. Did you wait? Did you not wait? It's kind of like, did you wirefall, or did you not wirefall? That sort of interaction. I don't know that there's. I mean, aside from Deviltry, I don't know that there's a monster that uses Exhaust as a in 3rd gen anyway, that uses Exhaust as a positive mechanic, but there are monsters like Zinogre that just cheat their way out of exhaustion. So Zinogre has the states that he charges up his enrage, and he still does it, I think, in the newer games too. And that enrage, the state can cancel the exhaustion early because enrage ignores exhaustion.
Yeah.
So you know, there's an argument to be made that the fact that things aren't uniform, that makes them harder, and I can respect that. I would still probably put 3 Ultimate around where I would put Freedom, which is still in like the easier half of games, probably like easier quarter of games, honestly. Again, it depends on, like, I could see somebody arguing that it's harder, like further up the list. It depends on what you find difficult. So,
or the highlight of like the difficulty, like if they're hyper focused on like one facet, like the very beginning progression or the end challenges and event quests and stuff.
Which is exactly why, like, even though I said like P3 is probably one of the easiest games, like it's hard for me. Same thing with Freedom. Like it's hard for me to be like, okay, well, is P3 easier than Freedom? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Same thing with the Ryu. I'd be a terrible difficulty tier list maker if you have to take one thing away from our hour-long conversation. I don't really. There'd be a lot of things that are about the same level, but like if we were to evaluate, I could probably do a better job at evaluating like each game probably in subcategories, like is the early game, mid game, late game more or less difficult. I guess you could.
Yeah, that's something I kind of did in the long difficulty video with the bar graphs.
Yeah, I remember that too. And like even then, like those aren't particularly great descriptors. Like where does early game end? And you could say
exactly.
high rank, low rank, B rank, but
where do we fit the outliers that are in these little sections? And couple quick things before we circle back completely. Exhaust. I know that exhaust doesn't affect elders in new gen titles. I don't think in 4th gen either. Was there ever a time when exhaust affected them?
No, I don't think so. I think it's always been. There's some non-elders too that don't get exhausted. I'm thinking more like a Cantor Euconolos. I'm pretty certain are immune to exhaust. I mean, they're elder tier. But so technically Double Joe is too. But yeah, they don't. What's interesting is there was a stamina system before, from what I understand anyway. I haven't looked exactly at the code. There was, like, the foundation for exhaust existed before 3rd gen. The status exhaust was created in 3rd gen, but monsters would have, at least some monsters in Freedom Unite would have a speed up and slow down sort of variable, if you want to call it that. But I don't know exactly. I wouldn't be the person to talk to about how that functioned. At the very least, it seems like Tigrex gets his teeth stuck. They had food. Like, this was on their mind to implement monsters being hungry and that sort of thing. So I don't think it's... I'm not sure it was necessarily designed intentionally to nerf creatures. I just see it as an extension of, like, hey, we wanted to make these monsters feel like more like living creatures rather than these sort of unstoppable trains, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not to say that all of them got that treatment, but yeah.
True. One other thing. So we brought up like iframes for rolls. I know that in 4th gen, it's like 6 frames matching like monsterhunterrise, like a 0.2 seconds frame of invulnerability or window. Is that also like the same for 3rd gen as well? And how much different is that from 2nd gen?
So, well, it's 1st gen that has the least amount of frames. I want to say, there's might be 2-frame difference
Sheesh.
between.
Sheesh.
Because you said 6. I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to give you definitive numbers off the top of my head.
I struggled
but-
iframe and stuff already. Like that.
Yeah, it's tight in first gen for sure. I don't know what the extent is. I know that so the one thing he was mentioning. Actually, I don't know if he's mentioned it yet. He'll talk about evade, the skill evade 1, and that's been tweaked too. The amount that evade 1 and evade 2 give throughout the history of the series has been adjusted. And yeah, I don't know the exact numbers. I know that it's gone up globally, at least till 5th gen, and then 5th gen, it's kind of weird. It's just weird to evaluate iframes. Like, we could take 3 points out of the 5 points as being evade 1, and then 5 out of the 5 being evade 2, but I don't know. And you also have so many more options in 5th gen for iframes, and in 4th gen compared to 3rd gen and second and first, because you have like back hop on sword and shield. You have all of the, if you want to call them iframes from the brave shenanigans in generations, but like you have the arts too. Yeah, so I mean, player iframes have gone up. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to evaluate the duration of attacks either, and like the activeness of hitboxes. But yes, player power has definitely increased on that end, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like I'm in for a treat when I hop to do this.
You have to be very how to describe this. I mean, the way I think about it is I roll when I think I'm going to be hit. Like, when I think it's going to connect. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm not. Speaking of iframes, there was one non-rolling iframe that existed that I've been having a lot of fun with. Gunlance's shelling in Monster Hunter 2 and Monster Hunter Freedom 2 used to give iframes.
Oh, I heard of that.
Although, according to Incog, it might not actually be giving you iframes. It might actually just be deleting your hurt box.
That's a funny interaction.
And what's weird about it is it's affected by, because it existed in Frontier 2 as well, like the early stages of Frontier, and then they took it out and then they re-implemented it in a different way because it was popular in Japan. But it occurs when your shell connects with a monster shortly after you fire it. So if you don't connect, I'm pretty certain you get like no iframes, which is why it's affected by area host, because it has to connect on the area host end, which throws things out the window. But yeah, Wyvern's Fire, because it hits 4 times, gives you 4 times the iframes that a shell will, and a shell is pretty close to an evade. So you can do some pretty cheeky stuff with it.
Holy moly.
But the timing is like really, really, like if you think evading is hard, you have to pre-fire ahead of time for when you think you're going to get hit for when your hit connects. Because again, it's about the same for a basic shell as a dodge. But you can dodge plus you have hip check with it. I've done it. Rathian Fireball, it'll go right through you. Wyvern's Fire can get through Rathian Charge and Rathian Tail Flip. Yeah, some crazy stuff.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's
man.
certainly not intended, but they'll bring up another Gunlance bug. Gunlance, again, as a Gunlance main, Gunlance has been bugged throughout the history of the series, and it has some of my favorite bugs. We talked about the snowman glitch earlier. There was also, because this won't be brought up in the video, there was also Alchemy Style and doing an infinite Wyvern Fire from Alchemy Style on the ledge.
Oh, what?
Yep. Yeah. Some funky shenanigans if you and Monster Hunter 4 has because Ludi, I tweeted at Ludi about this, that Monster Hunter 4 is also different from 4U because the hitboxes for long and wide gun lance are wrong. They're almost flipped. I would more describe it as long is shortened and wide is elongated. Normal's the same, but they messed those two up. so
that's the most bugged weapon across the series.
You can tell that all of their development time went into the gun lance.
Surely. And we'll just pick up where we left off.
Again lowers that skill ceiling, and some skills used to be nigh on crucial for some plights, like earplug. The duration of your immobility when hit by a roar is drastically reduced, so now there's nothing that can hit you while you're stunned, save for a Rathalos jumpback or fireball in rage mode. Compare that.
No, that Rathalos fireball.
It's funny that we mentioned that. I guess, you had just talked about that from Monster Hunter 4U.
Yeah, the Rathalos fireball, that's still there in 4U. Now, roar stun not lasting longer, that's interesting. And so there were, in 2nd gen and 1st gen, there was a lot more like follow-ups to roars.
So, well, there's tweaks to the duration even within 2nd gen. And so Freedom Unite, so people like to claim that Freedom 2 and Freedom Unite are the same, or like it's just an expansion. A lot of the roar stun got changed between Freedom 2 and Freedom Unite. It's still longer than it is in 3rd gen, but it's a variable that they've been tweaking. And this is where, like, who was it? Oceanas was playing through Dose, and they had posted something along the lines of, Gravios is unfair because he roars and then he beams me. And he was like playing gunner to try to get around the rough hit zones. Yeah, enrage was something you had to be very careful of. And not every monster had an enraged roar, but most monsters could roar and then take an action pretty quickly depending on how much they had to turn. So whether or not they had true follow-ups would depend on your position. And obviously if you had a weapon that could guard, you can guard the roar. But for the weapons that didn't, there's a few different ways you can deal with like roar follow-ups.
So like in the example of the Gravios beam, you would want to be closer to him whenever he's enraged?
You would want to be about like, you would want to be offset from him, I would call it, where he has to turn enough so that you don't get beamed, basically beamed immediately. And depending on your set, of course, like, yeah, the beams, it does a lot of damage. It's really threatening. But if you're, like, let's say you're playing light bowgun, not heavy bowgun, because heavy bowgun has a shield, so it'd be a little bit different. Your goal is still to be on the front half in the Gravios matchup, because in order to break his chest, I don't know how many games have this, but in order to break his chest, you actually have to be hitting the front side of it. And you can technically do that from behind with, like, pierce bullets. Some of the procs will be on the backside. And water ammo. But you generally want to be front facing to hit the belly to break it open, because that exposes the best hit zone, yada, yada, yada. But you want to be like about 90 degrees relative to him off. If he's like 0 degrees facing, it should be 90 degrees left to the right, somewhere within that range. So he has to do enough of a turn that you have enough time to get out of the stun to roll. When you're using melee weapons, your concern isn't necessarily a beam follow-up because you'll be underneath him. It's more the gas and dealing with the gas. So yeah, having these longer roar stuns led to a lot of situations where you had to be conscientious of, okay, is this monster still enraged or not? And how long does it typically take the monster to be enraged so you can prepare for the roar? And then with something like Rajang, and its roar got nerfed in Freedom United, it's one of the other ones. Gravios didn't, but Rajang did. He could roar you, and then he's usually fast enough that he could turn to you and hit you. But what you could do as a Blade Master melee player, you could stand usually just offside of his arm, and because monsters have trample damage, you can use the trample damage to take a little bit of chip off your health. Yeah, it sucks, but at least it gets you out of the stun. And when you're knocked on your butt, in second gen you have a little bit more get up frames, but like you have get up frames, so he's not able to as easily get something more powerful off. And there's a dynamic there too in choosing what hits you, which is something that's kind of gotten removed in Wilds. Like some people would, if you're running earplugs, one of your missions is, hey, hit the other people in your party because you are granting them iframes. And it's interesting because a lot of people also ran the like anti-player knockback decorations in both Rise and World. But I think in a coordinated group, there is a really cool dynamic where not only like you could launch players into mounting attacks, but you could also by knocking people away, you can save them. I mean, you can also disrupt them, which is the reason they removed it. But yeah, there's in the history of the series, there's the roars are definitely one of the methods. He talks about quake and wind pressure as well. They're one of the things that gets toned down quite a bit and did lead to these really, what I consider these really interesting positional puzzles that you have to solve when fighting a monster. Most of the time, people just found them too frustrating to deal with, but I'm also weird in that I like monsters to have that sort of to make monsters have that sort of advantage against you, even if it's not necessarily fair.
Yeah.
And there is counterplay to it. Like, again, you can run earplugs. It is an investment to run earplugs. You have to be aware of the fact that earplugs is a skill. But yeah, there's a bunch of hard CC in old gen that doesn't exist or has been toned down in new gen, where like it just outright doesn't hard CC you. Like sleep, for example. You know how you get drowsy and you like wander around and then you fall down? It used to just immediately knock you out.
Oh, wow. When did they make that change? Because in 4U, you can still do the little drowsy walk.
Oh, that was third gen.
Third gen? Baby game.
Yep. so yeah, I mean, you can understand, like, not to say that I necessarily think that Monster Hunter sucks now, you know, but like, you can understand, like, if a person's expecting those sorts of things to be present in the game and to have those sorts of challenges, to suddenly have those challenges removed and to not be as keen on the other ways that that third gen can be challenging. Yeah, I mean, it's why he made the video.
yeah. And it's definitely like easy to see where it used to be a part of the equation. Like you said, like the positional puzzle in a lot of ways. And seeing that toned down. I mean, even from like new gen perspective, going back to old gen, one of the things that was just prevalent to me playing through World, my first Monster Hunter, was things like roars, tremors, wind pressure. Like literally everything was just kind of inconsequential. It was just kind of like a time waster. And it was like, it was kind of annoying to deal with, but it wasn't annoying enough or punishing enough to ever be like, wow, I want earplugs. Wow, I want tremor res. Wow, I want wind res. The only time it was ever that punishing was Lunastra Nova, where you want wind res.
Yeah, it's bizarre to me that like there's certain, and I assume it's like legacy decisions that have been made with regards to skill costs in the 5th generation. Where like I think earplugs is still like a 5 point in Wilds.
And in World it was a level 3 deco.
And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it clearly gives you an advantage, but like, are we really going to say that that defensive value is as prevalent as it once was? Like, are we resulting? Because offensively, yeah, you get an attack window that you wouldn't otherwise get, but you can roll most roars these days with, I mean, most of the time you're running some level of evade, at least I am, in like World, because it was just on some sets.
Yeah.
Or you have the evasion mantle on, because the evasion mantle in World is crazy. In 2nd gen and 1st gen, so they had the evasion skill in those games. There are some roars you can't, that rolling isn't enough. You can obviously block them, but you have to be considerate of the blocking angle, because it's not as obvious sometimes. Like some roars come from a different spot along the monster than just the chest. so you can get hit behind you. I mean, that still happens in 3rd and 4th gen too, and probably 5th gen. But like 5th gen, there's a lot less roars that come from like the center. It's usually directly from the mouse, so it's at least a little bit more like you can line it up a little bit easier on site when you're first learning the fight.
True.
Yeah, it's a dynamic that it seems like they're still considering these defensive skills as if these status conditions the monster would inflict on you are as debilitating, or I don't know, maybe they just have a lot of casual players who would appreciate it, like players who really don't grind out monsters in the same way, or attempt to understand fights is like as in depth, you know.
True. Yeah, it's just definitely interesting seeing that evolution, because even like going back to 4th gen, like GU and 4U, you know, getting hit by roar, stun into attack setups, or wind pressure into attack occasionally, depending on the monster that I'm fighting. You know, there's actual consequences for that moment beyond just, oh, it adds an interesting element because if you iframe the tremor, that's an extra damage window you get that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And it's like, yeah, that adds an extra layer, sure, but it's not the same as if I mess this up, I'm getting punished, like actually getting punished with guaranteed damage. Because in 4U low rank right now, well, I'm past low rank, the monster that scared me the most was Rathalos, because Rathalos could actually lock me down and make me take guaranteed damage. And I didn't use any of my own pots against Shaggaroo, didn't use him against Gore. I barely had to respect a lot of the roster, bring potions or mega potions in general. But when Rathalos was in the picture, I was like, oh, well, I have to actually be a little more extra. I had to be extra careful. And if I'm not extra careful, then I'm going to get locked up, take free damage, and then boom, there goes my healing. And I ended up healing more against Rathalos just because of that simple fact. And it's like, you know, maybe...
Yeah, and when you have a finite amount of resources, you're like, wait a minute, that number is going down. I'm going to hit 0. You know?
It's a little more, yeah. And it's like maybe from like going from older gen to newer gen, maybe it's not so much of a thing because like to Maze, like they watered it down, and it's like Rathalos operating in that way is just like another Tuesday for him. But for me, coming from new gen, like that was culture shock. Like, what do you mean I'm locked up for free damage?
Yeah. It's where it's where games emphasize different skill sets, and it's not as easy. Like if I took somebody who's only I have a few people I know who still only play 1st and 2nd gen or 3rd and 4th gen, and I planted them in new gen. Like you've seen the new gen or old gen players who are fairly experienced in old gen try new gen. And there's things that they're not going to pick up in new gen that are just like, yeah, you should be doing this. This is obvious.
Yeah.
And vice versa. It works the exact opposite way too. I could take somebody who's even very experienced in 3rd and 4th gen, and if I put them in Monster Hunter 1, there's going to be things that frustrate them because they're expecting things to work the way they do in 3rd and 4th gen. And that's how they frame their standard. And that's fair. Like, it's not necessarily their fault. It's just the natural consequence of having the game fundamentally play different.
Yeah. It feels like while the core, like, experience of this is monster, you hunt it, carve it, make things out of it, while that's remained consistent across the board, there are, like, transferable elements, like moving laterally to avoid, like, charges and... You know, putting yourself in a certain position to avoid getting insta-punished by insta-charges.
Yeah, using your stamina to run and roll. Like,
yeah, Superman dive, like, you see something big coming, you can use that. Like, there's like, things that have remained consistent. The formula changes so much, and even just the way the monsters behave and act and work. You know, I had this impression, you know, going from Iceborne to GU that the monsters weren't going to be as fast, and lo and behold, the G-rank monsters in GU were faster than the Iceborne monsters. And I wasn't faster, you know?
And... Yeah, no, if anything, you were slower.
Yeah. And so like it's like there's the eyes get opened, the third eye gets opened. And like even now with like wilds, seeing like the combo machines that they're producing in high rank, and you know, working through for you right now, and maybe a monster will have one follow-up or something occasionally. And I felt the same thing in GU, and it would be the same thing if I went back and played World or something, and a lot of Rise as well. But in Wilds, they're like got Gore throwing 3-hit combos like he's Risen Shaggaroo. Like there's all sorts of like little extra tinkering that they're doing along with the monster AI and how things change. It's just playing all this new, it's new to me, but it's old, you know, playing all this old Monster Hunter, it's just kind of a fresh coat of paint on everything, and my experience is weird.
That's where I like to emphasize with people. Again, don't read, like, when you're looking to start a game, don't just go off of the monster roster and the weapon list, because it's just not gonna, like, knowing that a hunt is in the game, I mean, it might help you to some degree, but it's not gonna really tell you how that game feels to play, and like on a moment by moment basis, what sorts of things you're gonna be doing and what's gonna be optimal. And yeah, just they're fundamentally different games, even if they're like 95% the same.
Yeah,
on paper.
It's like World and Rise, I could skip over most mechanics with IG's pole vault, but in my playthrough with 4, the only monster that I could reliably use the pole vault to skip a mechanic was Najarala, whenever it would coil around me.
Yeah.
So like, it's just so different with even like, I'm using this weapon, it plays close enough to World. You know, but
yeah, it's still that weapon. It still has the core identity of that weapon being you get buffs, you bounce up in the air, and you zoom around, but
tornado combo, you know, like you can still hit with the backswing off the second hit in Tornado Slash. It's familiar, but so different, like in mindset. It's just definitely interesting. But yeah, the whole roar stun into confirm hit setups, that's something I'm definitely gonna have to get in the mindset of whenever I go back and play DOS and Freedom Unite inevitably.
It is going to be it's might be bigger of a culture shock than going from 5th gen to 4th gen, but it's like having a ton of small monsters all of a sudden, and they're all threatening. When you've played games where most of the time Wilds, they've done a little bit better of a job of having them kind of butt in, but it's almost like small monsters are just large monsters, but small.
The Velocidrome.
Yeah, and it can be like, well, how in when a beginner goes through that sort of stuff, it's very overwhelming. It's a huge barrage to the framework that you have, because it's like, how in the world do I deal with this? So yeah, I can understand people being frustrated by those sorts of things. At the same time, it doesn't mean it's impossible to get around. It doesn't mean that you can't have a good time with it. It just means you have to think about it differently than whatever you were originally thinking would work.
Very different, yeah. Alright guys, that's it for today, but be on the lookout for part 3 coming in 3 days, hopefully. Before that, I got some shoutouts to make. Thank you to all of my members that help support this channel. You guys are amazing, from my bacon bits, my one meatball Terry Bull holding it down. By the way, extra shout out to Terry Bull for the fat donation he gave on stream the other day. Thank you, man. As for my head chefs and filet mignon, Akir, Funalos, Monster Hunter, Sev for short, Mr. MH, El Mango, thank you guys. You guys keep holding down the fort, and I am super appreciative. You guys have no idea how much each and every single one of you helped me out.
I've got dinner ready. Let him cook.